the minute that someone comes out with an accusation of any kind of substance abuse in family court, you're sunk. My husband, ex-husband now, figured out that this was just a deal breaker. This was the absolute, this gave him all the power in the world, was to come out with an allegation of substance abuse, because it immediately put me on the ropes, and I started making every mistake in the book, because I believed that he was really concerned about it, even though I knew better. I knew he wasn't. But I had to start convincing myself that he really was, because otherwise it was too telling that he didn't love me, and he was manipulating things, and I didn't want to believe that. I wanted to believe he was really concerned about me. So I started doing things like going to treatment. I started creating evidence that it was correct, and it ended up just being this huge mess, and it stuck with me forever. And it was, and there was never any in all my life. There was never any sign that I was any kind of drug addict or substance abuser or anything like that. And I'd had, in fact, when I had my kids, I wanted to go completely drug free, and my mother thought that was just absolutely crazy and insane, that I didn't want to take any drugs for pain for that. And so I kind of lived a certain way, where I thought that I had kind of established who I was. I didn't think that anyone was going to be thinking that I would be any kind of substance abuser, but lo and behold, in this scenario, he came out, and over the course of many, many months behind my back, sort of created this layered approach to kind of muddying the waters and creating this false perception. We do things to get through certain things temporarily, and in my case, that's exactly what was happening, because I was on these antidepressants because I was certainly depressed, but I never thought of this as going to be a permanent thing. I just thought I was trying to get through something, and I had very little understanding about what was going on in my life. Then I had this injury happen, and that I definitely thought was going to be temporary. It went on longer than I thought, and so I started asking for help. I started asking my family, my mother and my husband, for help, which no one wanted to help me, and so that prolonged my need for taking the medication. And but I was very motivated to not be taking it, and I'd never had an addictive personality, never been addicted to anything before. It wasn't causing any problems in my life, except for that my husband was now deciding to, he was going to use this as an excuse. He was going to use this as the reason that he was going to leave me. A really abusive thing to do, to take what someone's doing in a situation, for whatever they're doing for self-soothing, if they're not hurting anybody else, and then all of a sudden focusing in on it and making this the big issue. That is very abusive. And in my case, that is exactly what it was. It was totally abusive. It was not the point. He was planning to leave our marriage anyway, and this got to be just his excuse for doing it. And he used it as a huge distraction and a way to manipulate the court, and a way to manipulate perceptions amongst all of our friends. And he did so very destructively and very effectively, I might add. And I did nothing to help myself. I completely fed into it, because the worst thing in the world for me was to believe that he didn't love me. So I bought into the notion, even though it completely made no sense. After a while, I bought into the notion that he really did believe this. And so I started jumping through all kinds of hoops to try and prove to him that I was fine. And then no matter what hoops I jumped through, he was still mad at me. He made more hoops and more hoops and more hoops. By the time the whole thing was over, I had basically, he had complete control over everything. He had all of the assets. Because while I was like away getting treatment, he was emptying bank accounts and manipulating our finances, and it was he was completely using this focus on this thing as a distraction while he completely took advantage of me. And it was very effective in family court. Family court jumped right on board with it. And the funny thing is too is that he even tried to do it when he came back to do a custody battle with me again years later, and because that was the only thing he knew how to do, so he did it all over again, which there was absolutely no, and I proved it right off the bat. This time there was no truth to it. But because I was the one that was the designated patient, that even when he got pulled over for drunk driving, it was like the court had decided, no, I'm already the one with the problem, so we couldn't mess up muddy the waters. They didn't want to complicate matters. So basically, he was basically let go scot-free over that, but the eyes were still on me. It was really, really what I noticed happening was, when it comes to drugs and alcohol anyway, and family court, is there's just no rhyme or reason, no logic whatsoever, and it completely is a way of tipping the scales in your favor or against you, whatever side is going to be the one that comes out with these allegations. And like I said, the other one that I have noticed is also just about as damaging, is some kind of you're crazy kind of thing mixed in, because I saw my ex-husband's wife do this to her husband, where it was something to do with crazy, especially if you could link it to sexual craziness. But it was still the same kind of witch hunt. It was still the same kind of just way to try and focus in on something that had nothing to do with anything, and it was just completely a distraction, and it was completely abusive. And the truth of the matter was that in my case, what I was doing was I really was just trying to get through, because I was being severely abused, and then it got to be legal abuse, it got to be financial abuse, it got to be all these other kinds of abuse, and I was just trying to, what made perfect sense was for me to get through all of that and then deal with my health issues. But because of the way that he was manipulating things and manipulating the court, manipulating me, and the fact that I was buying into it, and the fact that I didn't just say, screw you, and there's that I did all the things, that I felt guilty. I felt like he must love me. He must be really concerned about me. I didn't take it that he was just purely manipulating me and manipulating the court and manipulating opinions, public opinions, and trying to manage perceptions and all of that. That he was using me, and he was using my vulnerability against me. And I have no doubt that if he'd known there were other things, if there had been other, whatever it would have been, if I had any kind of other self-soothing behaviors like she mentioned, those would have come up too. I didn't happen to have them, but say I had an eating disorder, or say I was a cutter, or anything like that. If there had been anything, it would have come up. No doubt about it. And not because of any kind of genuine concern, or not because it has anything to do with anything, just because it would be a way to manipulate the court and a way to manipulate perceptions. And I thought it was a very insightful take on things, because we do have a culture that makes people have these snap reactions, and the ways that people reacted, some of my friends reacted, was shocking. And interestingly enough, the friends that actually themselves were maybe drinking a little too much, or the one that actually had overdosed before accidentally, and did use drugs, at least relatively recently. Those were the ones that abandoned me. The ones that had never used drugs were fine. So it was really interesting. It was like they had their own. It was like too close to home or something. Like they had something that they were hiding of their own that they felt threatened by or something. But it was very, very interesting that of the 6 friends that I had, the 3 that were drinking a little too much, or I had on a birthday video I have, there was like one making a joke to the other one about drinking some wine with Vicodin, and stuff like that. It was them doing that, making that joke. But these are the people that abandoned me. And this was like, that joke was being said like a year before all this happened. So anyway, I thought that it was an interesting idea and an interesting topic, that if you were to find out some friend of yours had, was doing something like that, what would your reaction be? I definitely don't believe that my reaction would be immediately to be like, you're wrong. I mean, I would definitely be, I would be curious, like what does it do for you? What are you getting out of it, or why are you doing it? And like I said, I'm not just talking about substance abuse, substance use. I'm talking about any kind of self-soothing thing you might do. And some are obviously in our culture more socially acceptable than others, but and I would definitely say if you are involved in any kind of relationship that is going sideways and you think you might end up in court, if you are doing anything that involves any kind of drinking or anything like that, I'd be very, very careful and keep it. You don't want to develop an addiction that's going to weaken your ability to think on your feet and be effective in court and all of that. You don't want anything that they can use against you, because obviously they will. So you want to take care of yourself. You don't want to do something that's harming you. As long as you're not harming anyone else, and you're not, you're not harming your kids. In my case, what I ended up doing, I would have been fine. I was in no jeopardy at all if I hadn't been with someone who was looking for something they could use against me. And so because of that, I was vulnerable. I left my kids vulnerable. So that was, it would have been, in my case, my situation, because I had someone looking for something to use against me, it made me vulnerable. But what was I to do? I had serious injuries, and because I tried to get off the medication and stuff, because I was trying to prove that I wasn't an addict and that I could get off the medication and all that, and I was trying to prove that my marriage was the most important thing to me. I put myself through tons of torture. Tons of needless torture that was just absolutely got me nowhere, and weakened me that much more, and was really just awful, and obviously to do it all over again, well, hindsight's always 20/20, and I would have completely just stood up and said, forget it. I'm not gonna try and I'm taking care of myself the way that my doctor and I have agreed to take care of myself, and I'm doing what I think is right. And I would have just stood in that, but I wasn't secure enough to do that back then, and and I thought that he cared about me. So I was trying to, you know, save my marriage and all that stuff. But yeah, so it's basically, it's a topic about compassion. It's a topic about not being judgmental, and it's about not adding to someone's pain, not adding to someone, if someone's in an abusive situation and they're in a painful situation and they're doing something to cope, not adding to their pain, and you know, having some compassion about whatever it is that they're doing to self-soothe, and not being, you know, not being judgmental and adding to the abuse over that, which I think is what only a toxic person is going to do that. You know, a toxic person is going to see that as a vulnerability to exploit. So, you know, that was the point of her video. But thank you for that video. I thought that was a good topic, and I hope that I've added a little something to that discussion, because it was definitely something that affected me. Okay, thanks a lot, and I'll talk with you guys soon. Bye-bye.